live from Sister Basebone Studio. Urban Teachers Lounge is a platform for bridging the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. Voices will include teachers, administrators, educational scholars, community members, and activists.
Hey everybody, welcome to Urban Teachers Lounge. I'm your host, Funmilayo. This podcast is unapologetically for Black teachers, unapologetically by Black teachers. The purpose of the program is to bridge the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. This week, it is the beginning of a new year, 2020. So, there are some things that we need to talk about. Go grab your cup of coffee and let's get in. All right, y'all. So I will admit, one, I've been holding on to this particular podcast or recording this podcast for at least about 2 weeks. The holidays set in. I hope that you had a marvelous holiday. I hope you rested. Teachers, we need our Christmas break, holiday break. If it's not Christmas for you, just time to be with your family. You need that time. And it is now a new year, 2020. So today, I want to really talk about, I'm going to be focused. You know, I got to give you my 3 things so I can maintain focus on this conversation. Number 1, I want to talk about reflection. I want to talk about celebration and my thank you. So the first thing that I want to say is today is a special day. It is almost exactly a year when I dropped my very first podcast. Wow. So that is an accomplishment for me, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that I jumped out, that I said, you know what, I want to do this. I worried like everybody else, you know, are there going to be any listeners? You know, what does my voice sound like? You know, I went through all of that foolishness, back talk in your head. But I did it, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm proud to have an audience, whether it's one person listening or 1 million people listening. I'm definitely grateful for you, my listeners. So I first, let me start here. I want to start with my thank yous. I'm not going to call all of the guests that came on because, of course, I'm not going to do that. But I do want to say thank you to all of my guests. From the very first person that came on my show, I'm excited that you trusted me, that you worked with me. You know, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to have a conversation. So I'm grateful to all of my guests. I'm grateful to all of my supporters, all of those people that supported me in the hallways, in the building, even as I'm in the street and I'm talking about, you know, this podcast and my desire to bridge the gap. So I thank all of my guests, all of my listeners, all of my supporters, all of my friends, family. You know, this is amazing to me that I have done a podcast and I've been doing it for a year. So number 2 in my thank yous, this is a special podcast because it is my 25th podcast. And 25, you know, anniversary or whatever you want to call it. This is exciting, you know, for me. And again, it's because of you, my listeners. So I wanted to put those 2 things out. I'm celebrating 25th anniversary or 25th podcast rather. I'm celebrating almost exactly 1 year. I'm about a couple weeks away from 1 year of having a podcast. But now, let's get to what I really wanted to talk about is reflection. At the end of the year, well, I'll talk about me. Me personally. Personally, I reflect 2 times a year. I reflect on my birthday. What did I do from birthday to birthday? And I always reflect at the end of the year. This year has been, last year, 2019, was an interesting one. But when I think about the things that I did do, that I did accomplish, including this podcast, it was dope. And I'm excited about that. This reflection that I want to speak of specifically is as it relates to being a classroom teacher. So this particular year, let me give you some backdrop. This particular year, school year, I was able to create a class. Wow, right? How many times, how often do we get to do this? And it was fabulous. It was fabulous. So I was challenged with teaching electives this year. And I knew that coming into the school year. So one of the biggest class that I have, meaning I have 3 of them, of the same class, is called Oral and Written Communication. So I'm a high school teacher, if you're, just now listening and you don't know how I roll. So as a high school teacher, I've been teaching in secondary education for a long time. And there are some things, every cohort of kids that you get is different. I don't know why we compare, and that's a whole podcast on its own. Why do we compare cohorts to each other? Because each group of kids, they're different. So I was challenged to do this elective. And so as this particular class, you can create it however you want to, but obviously it falls within the construct of oral and written communication. So what I did with them is I wanted to first think of, what do I want them to know, right? And this podcast right now is really talking about practitionership. What do you do? What is your practice as a teacher? And even though this is my first time doing a class, creating it, I have always, every year, been able to bring myself into my classroom and make adjustments to make sure that I am culturally relevant when I teach, okay? So I wanted to say, this particular class, there were a couple of things I wanted to know, or I wanted to do. What do I want to teach them? Meaning, what do I want them to know? And how am I going to get this across? Woo! Now, that was funny. So I decided, I was a humanities major, actually, in my undergrad. So English and social studies and literature and arts, all those things kind of merged together in my head. So this is like my personal baby to be able to do this. And even sometimes when the kids would come into class, they're like, "Oh, is this a history class? It's all of it, baby. You need to understand social justice." And I've told my children always, whatever I learn, I'm teaching it to you. So I'm working on a PhD. You as a 9th grader, or you as an 11th grader, or senior, you too are going to get this PhD knowledge that I'm getting, right? So anyway, I created a class, and so my master's degree was in curriculum and instruction. And I have to, again, give you this backdrop for a couple of reasons. One, too often people think that that educators are not career educators, meaning we don't have the professionalism, i.e. we don't have the degrees, we didn't study. It's more than 5 weeks it takes more than 5 weeks to be an educator. I said that strategically. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway, I'm not even gonna go down that road. Anyway, it takes a while. So teachers, to be a highly qualified teacher, many of us have gone to school and studied extensively. So my master's is in curriculum and instruction. What does that mean? Curriculum, what are you teaching? For me, it's simple. What are you teaching? And instruction, how are you teaching it? So I approached this class, creating this class. It was 4 things, because we have 4 units. So 4 things I wanted to bring to the students that I felt that they probably didn't know. And I wanted to kind of give them some background. One, I started with Reconstruction, right? Then I went to second Reconstruction. The third unit, which will start next week, is my Black Lives Matter unit. And then the fourth unit is global movements. I'm giving you this because I want you to see how teachers, meaning myself, how I've processed, how I've stayed in the profession, and my dedication to the students first. You know, at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, I am there solely for the kids. So going back to the way I outlined this, I wanted the kids to learn communication. Do you know how to speak in front of your peers? Do you know how to write a speech? Collective speaking. We have circle time, and I got that from Restorative Practices. I love that. I need to finish my training on that, but I've done the first 2 trainings on restorative practices. So really teaching the kids collectively speaking, creating safe spaces. I wanted them to learn about writing, meaning not just to write, but finding your voice. How do you feel about things? So even reflection. So those were the main things I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to understand, thirdly, conflicts. So within the units that I created, right? The conflicts, they need to understand. Now, granted, again, if you don't know who I am, I teach Black students, predominantly Black neighborhood, Black and brown students, but it's still predominantly Black children. So the conflicts that I wanted them to look at, Booker T. Washington versus W.E.B. Du Bois, King versus Malcolm X, terrorism versus revolution. And that's where we are right now. This particular unit, I'm dealing with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I want them, the book that we're going to be doing, I just lost the name of it, When They Call You a Terrorist, right? So I want them to really understand, how is it, that the Black Lives Matter movement is terrorism, but the tiki torches in Virginia is not. Okay, right? So, but I want them, again, the other piece is we need to teach our kids to critically think. So you got to give them the information. What I found is making kids upset helps them to find their voice. So if I tell them, let's argue about these 2 things, which one do you agree with, right? And my last unit is colonialism versus independence. And so I wanted to broaden their thinking of, let's look outside of U.S. context and let's look at some global movements. That'll be, in the springtime. And my goal and idea with that is to look at musicians, because I'm a musician, right? I'm saying this again because this is how I've processed. So at the end of the year, that's the backdrop. At the end of the year, I went through, my first unit. I'm teaching the kids about Booker T. Washington. I'm thinking about W.E.B. Du Bois. So I've led them up because a lot of them didn't understand Reconstruction. I was very strategic to start there. Somewhere, my history friends have told me, and I've seen it for myself, the history books tend to tell us about slavery and then Martin Luther King. And somewhere along the line, we just don't get a whole lot of information between that 100-year gap, 1865 to 1965, right? And our kids did not know, a lot of them do not know, that there was some major accomplishments that happened during Reconstruction, right? So this is what we talked about. I realized, and this is coming where that's what I want to teach. But now the instructional piece. How can I teach them about Reconstruction? Because I know they did not have the foundation. Well, I started out with the unit, everything that I created, right? As a teacher, you can create a unit or you can create a lesson plan, and it doesn't always go the way you want it to. Or in my case, it wasn't that they couldn't do that. It's that I had to provide more backdrop, more knowledge, foundational knowledge. So it boiled down to, I had to go all the way back to, okay, what is Reconstruction? What happened during Reconstruction? And it was great, actually. My biggest fear, however, was actually reading the Atlanta Compromise, which is the words of Booker T. Washington, and actually reading W.E.B. Du Bois's response. So in 2019-20, right, we are telling our kids, we're saying most school districts are a part of their mission. A part of their mission is to have kids that are college and career ready. So that's where I started with them: Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So technically, Booker T. Washington was dealing with technical learning, right? Trades. Whereas W.E.B. Du Bois was more on education, formal education, college and so on and so forth. But I wanted the kids to see this. I needed them to understand that, one, Black people really stopped to think about our education. I'm not the first person in 2019. You're not the first person in 2020, right, to really diligently think about how we're going to educate the next generation. What are we going to teach them? How are we socializing them? Like, folks was thinking about this during slavery, right? How do we move? The slogan or the cliche is upward mobility, right? And a part of upward mobility, the American dream, that's a whole nother conversation. But a part of that is education. If you learn, if you work hard, this is definitely another podcast. If you work hard and go to school, you can get a good job and you can have the life that you want to live. Well, again, we know that's a whole nother conversation. So again, I'm giving you the backdrop because I need you to follow me for a minute on this reflection. So at the end of the year, the end of the school year, the first semester rather, it now comes a time where we have to do a final. So I'm like, oh my God, because of the, ups and downs, ebbs and flows of teaching, you all know what I'm talking about, between grading, between administration, between whatever's going on in the community, whatever's going on as a whole in the school. Sometimes you lose yourself in what you really wanted to do and what you really are doing. So, somewhere, and then you just get tired. By December the 1st, most of us are tired, right? And it's time for a break. So as I sat there trying to figure out what am I going to ask my kids as a final? First, testing, the way that we test, again, that's a whole nother podcast. The way that we test is not, it doesn't always give us the results that we really need and the ones that we really want. Like testing, how often do we test students and it gleans the results that we want? Meaning, not that they passed the test, but did they learn something? So I challenged these kids, I promise you, for the whole year. It was a wrestle, it was a fight, it was definitely ups and downs. But the kids blew me away. So what did I do? For their final, I gave them what I thought was very easy final, right? Here's the final. I said, write a 2-page reflection paper, 500 words. You got to give kids a number. Write a 2-page, 500-word reflection paper about what you learned in this class. And I helped them out. I gave them an outline. And in my class, my kids have to use a composition book because I'm a composition book queen. You should see all the composition books that are around me right now for my research and my papers that I need to write and ones that I'm already writing. So I'm like, okay, here's an outline. This is what we went over, right? Get your composition book. You should have some juice in there. It was amazing how the kids, some of them kind of struggled, like, what do you want me to write? Why do you want me? And it was interesting. I'm like, wow, But that was actually another class. For this class, the kids, I was really in awe. They sat there, they typed, and they got it done. The reflection piece that I want to really focus on now is reading the essays. As I read the essays, now I need you to understand this is the end of the first semester. This is the end of me implementing a curriculum that I created, right? So at the end of this semester, I felt like, oh my God, did I teach anything? Because the day-to-day really makes you think, like, what exactly did we teach? What did I work on? And more importantly, what did they learn? So as I sat and I read, and this is when I was planning to write this, to do this podcast 2 weeks ago, and I got sidetracked. But I read some of the papers, and I cried, I promise you, for 8 hours. I know I did. Because as I read their reflection of what I did in the classroom, what they did in the classroom, and the power of how they felt, right? Their voices. First of all, I told you at the beginning, what did I want them to learn? I wanted them to learn about, some history type stuff, right? Social justice things. But I wanted them to learn how to communicate, how to think, and to read some of these papers. It was amazing how the kids said we created a safe space. When we sat in the circle, we were able to really talk about things that bother us as teenagers, talk about the things that's going on in the world, realizing that even though we're different in the classroom, and some kids might be, the football players, or might be, the what do you call them? Drawing a blank. The good kids, or the smart kids, or the popular kids. That's what I was trying to get to. But putting them in a circle, they were able to articulate like, wow, I learned that these kids think the way, have the same experiences, some of them, and the same struggles, and they're processing just like I am. And they felt a community. And I had to cry because, one, I didn't know, because I got caught up, right? I got caught up in the everyday, you got to have lesson plans. Oh, you got to clear the hall. Oh, you got to do. I got caught up in all of that. And I doubted myself on what I was teaching. So the kids, this is the first time actually that I've ever gotten, I would say, an immediate response. Because, as a teacher, most of the time you don't know all the juicy stuff that you did for kids until the end of the year, or they go to another school. They graduate, they go to a different high school, they go to the military, or they go to college, or whatever. So teachers, it's difficult for us to get some immediate feedback on what we're getting. And I'm not talking about the regular, they mad at you because you messed up their grade. And, that's teenage crap. They got to take responsibility for some stuff. But I'm talking about the part that as a teacher, you really need to know. Number one, it is very encouraging to know the changes that you're making in the world as a teacher. And to know that you are, I'm thinking of Pac now, you are appreciated. Kids don't always have the words to say stuff. You know what I'm saying? Until, teacher appreciation or whatever. So my point for this podcast is this: reflect. I want to challenge us to think about, what are we teaching? I always laugh and say the only thing that I learned in my master's program was the hidden curriculum. And the hidden curriculum is this: what are you teaching kids that is not on the curriculum? So that means how you carry yourself. And I'm not being judgmental in the sense of, follow the conversation. How do you carry yourself? Do you have good character in school? Do you have good character with your coworkers? Do you show your kids that you're a human? Because a lot of times our kids, unless they see you only when they see you in the grocery store, or only when they see you doing something that is more humanistic, meaning you show up to the football game or you show up to one of their events, and they find out little nuggets about you, right? So I showed at the end of the semester, I think also, no, it was around Thanksgiving. A friend of mine, we used to do what we call cocoa and poetry. And we would have an open mic. And for that period, for the kids, you get them obviously some hot chocolate. And you got to be careful with how you do that. But these are big kids, right? So they have hot chocolate. And then their job is to either write a poem or some kind of expression that they need to do, and they go to the stage. So I did that this year. And I brought my bass to school, right? Or my guitar, one of them, or both. But I'm saying that again, and these are ways that you humanize your existence as a teacher. How often have you told the kids, hey, look, this is not a good day for me, right? So I'm warning you, this is not a good day for me. So please be mindful of how you're behaving or how you're whatever. We have to show kids the human side. And every time I've ever done that, even if a kid didn't comprehend what I said, there was always another student in there that's like, now she already told you, fall back today, right? So let's just do our work. She having a bad day. Here's the thing. That's a part of that hidden curriculum. I'm teaching you how to manage your emotions. Oh my God. When you speak to the other teacher in the hallway, I don't have to like you, even though I like most people. But what I'm also teaching you is this. How do you say good morning, right? How are you courteous? How are you, professional, right? How do you treat people? These are things that is not in the curriculum. It's all about modeling the behavior that you want, right? And as a teacher, that is one of the most important things. You can tell kids stuff all day long, but how do you walk? What are you saying? So I want us to really consider that in our reflection. At the end of the school year, we're all on our way back to school. We start tomorrow. Some of you might start next week. What have you done the first semester, right? Let's think about, what did your kids learn? What did you learn about your students? How do you reach them? What is those triggers that get them to their next level? Because that's our job. That is our job, to raise children, to educate children, to teach them how to be a human, to teach them to be critical thinkers, to teach them to live outside of their communities, right? To teach them how to live outside their neighborhoods, to give them an exposure that they may not have had at home. This is not to degrade or to say anything other than this is the whole purpose of education, is to teach children how to be self-sufficient adults, right? Responsible, caring, compassionate. I have a tattoo. This is a sidebar, right? But I do have a tattoo that two of my PhD friends, actually one is my wife, and then one of our other friends, we got a tattoo and it says, compassion is revolution. So think about that, like compassion is revolution. Are we teaching children to be compassionate? So we can talk about 45 all day long. Okay, bet. We can talk about, what's going on in the world. Okay, bet. But at the end of the day, teachers, we deal with kids we have them in our space a long time within a school year, right? We work with them hours and hours. What are we teaching? So as I want you to think about, what did you teach last year, last semester? Who are those babies that need you the most, right? And we say that all the time, that's that one that, oh, they come to class, they always come to class, they always wreaking havoc, or they're always doing whatever. That kid needs you the most, right? How are you reaching them? Or did you turn them away? We and I'm not saying, you can't save them all. We can argue that point. But I firmly believe, as a teacher, I've always believed this: the kids that are in my class are for me. They're to teach me something about myself. And of course, it is for me to teach them something. It's a reciprocal thing. You're not the only one, sage on stage. These kids have valuable lessons for us. And just like when I read those final essays, those kids got to me. And there's no way that they would know. They couldn't write what they thought I wanted them to hear. They had to really stop and reflect. How often do we challenge kids to reflect? And how often do we get time to reflect? So, reflection. Let's think about what we're doing. Let's be intentional. One of the things that I'm hearing for this 2020, everyone is talking about clear vision, right? Because your eyes and so on and so forth. So what is your vision for 2020? Your vision as an educator, your vision as a lifelong learner, right? Even if you don't necessarily go back to school and, get a PhD or EDD or 1, 2, 3, right? I think we still have an obligation to our students, to our community, to our ancestors. We have an obligation to be our best selves, right? And to teach from that lens, and to teach our students to be their best selves from kindergarten all the way up to, 20, meaning P20, right? From the beginning, all of their academic careers. It is our responsibility. So reflect on that. My challenge is this. I have a challenge for you. What are you reading? Now, I'm talking to myself right here. In the 18 years, that I've been teaching, as an English/reading teacher at times, I've had difficulty reading for myself. Meaning, you're reading papers, you're doing their homework. But what are you doing to feed you, right? That's what I want to challenge you with. What are you reading? Not just, the newspaper, that's great. But what are you reading to feed your spirit, to feed your soul, to feed you as a teacher, to give you new tools when you go into the classroom? And now you know how to reach that kid. That one little kid that, they're going to drive you crazy because you haven't learned the lesson yet. The question is, what have you done to learn the lesson? Because the kids come the way they are. And we have a responsibility to expose them. So challenge number 2, which goes along with challenge number 1, commit to developing your skills as an educator. I don't care what they say. I've read a lot. You guys you hear a lot about my research and my dissertation and blah, blah, blah. A lot of things. It is a master narrative. The master narrative is that black kids can't, black teachers don't, right? Black schools will never. That's a lie. Because I've always had black teachers. I am a black teacher. You're a black teacher. And I trust that you value this profession, right? When I think about the teachers that I've had that have spoken life into me, right? And I'm talking about life into my 8th grade English teacher is the reason why I journal, like real talk. When I started taking my teacher certification courses, that next teacher, I wish I knew her name, but that woman she had a PhD and she was a third grade teacher. And she straight said, you know what? I got this PhD to be a better teacher. I'm like, wow. So we already know that we are needed in education. We know that, some of us, there are different routes to how we handle education. We might not be in the classroom. We might be leaders or activists or however we do it. But we are needed because somebody fought for us to be educated, right? And I believe it's our responsibility to the next generation. So this is a short podcast, right? I just wanted to say thank you again. Thank you. Let me say this before I leave. Part of the reason why it was so long for me to write or to record this podcast is because I really wanted to make a movie, right? So I wanted to make a audio movie clip or something that just is a review of the 24 and now 25 podcast. That was the goal. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I was like, oh, you need to kind of drop this podcast. So this year, my vision is to definitely grow the podcast. I want you on this podcast. Thank you for listening to me, but I want to hear your voices. It is important. Too many people think that Black teachers don't do anything, right? We are the most creative folks. When we meet kids or we have a challenge, we are adaptive, right? We are able to shift gears. We're able to, I can teach you this way, right? So I want your voices. I want you to share your thoughts. Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook because those are the two that I really check. So anyway, I think that's it. I didn't have a long thing. Reflection, celebration. Celebrate yourself as a teacher. You might not be, the teacher you want to be. We're all a work in progress. I'm still learning stuff. There are things that I know now that I didn't know in year 1 or year 5 or year 10, right? But I'm still pushing. I'm still learning. And as I learn, I love that quote, lift as you climb. The more I learn, the more I'm going to teach my students. The more and one of the things that I've learned, and I'm going to keep saying it, reflection. Let me go a little bit deeper on that. In order for you to reflect, you got to stop. You got to pause. You got to rest. You got to let your brain pause for a minute. Go to sleep, right? So that you can really silence your mind to really reflect. So that's all I got for you today. I'm glad you were here. I hope you share this podcast with your community of teachers, scholars, and activists. I do want to hear from you. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. I will upload some newer ones on YouTube, but all of my podcasts are there, minus a few. Leave your comments and suggestions. Until we meet again, peace, power, and progress.